Hi, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Brian Michael.
That would make me Angela Yeager. So we have a special episode for you this week. This is our list of our favorite movies of the past decade. Brian and I have been working really hard at assembling our lists. We're dividing this into two episodes. So this first episode are our favorite films from, and we define the decade as 2010 to 2019. I've seen some lists that started in 2009, but that just messes with my head. I can't do that. So 2000, I saw some lists that start 2009 as the decade. I don't know. So 2010 to 2019, the best films or our favorite films of that decade. And so we're going to do our first five. And then the next episode after this, you'll see, will be our top five. So we'll start off right into it with my number 10 favorite movie of the decade. Oh, and I forgot to preface one thing. If you're just going to go through all of our old episodes and look at the number ones, it's not going to match because as time goes on, your favorite films can shift a little bit. You find that you rewatch some and some others you maybe admire. You certainly think they're quality films, but maybe they aren't the films you love dearly and hold close to your heart. So I definitely went with more of a heart feeling on my list this year. You always have different criteria for what you want for your favorite films. I think maybe because of what's going on in our world right now, I definitely went with ones that I hold closer to my heart right now. So my number 10 film of the decade is from 2018. It is the film Blindspotting by Carlos Lopez Estrada. Not my number one that year it came out, but it did make my top five. And the more I have seen this film, and I've rewatched it several times since it came out, the more powerful it becomes. Certainly the story of two young men in Oakland dealing with racial strife, as well as trying to find their way in the world in a quickly gentrifying city, certainly has even more power today than it did when it came out in 2018. But it holds two central performances and a really powerful friendship at its core, and some great character development and performances. So I just continue to love this film. I think Carlos Lopez Estrada seems like a really promising director. I believe this was his first feature film. His next film already showed at Sundance, but unfortunately I don't know when. That means we'll get to see it. So this is a film I can come back to time and time again.
Yeah, this is a great film. This was my number 21. I have a list on Letterboxd of, is it 104?
Oh,
104?
it's already on there, so I could have spied and seen your top 10, huh?
It's 108, and I have it private right now. So I'll publicize it here pretty soon. But as you said, it does kind of fluctuate, and it's a living being. It's really hard to sit there. Some days that certain films go up a little higher, and some films kind of slip a little bit. And yeah, if you can't necessarily, I originally told you, yeah, just go by your number ones and just rank them 1 through 10, and that's an easy way to start with it. And then it just kind of shifts and shuttles as
Yeah.
things happen. And that's going to happen because it's an opinion. It's something that we love, but it's a great film. It really is. I think it was my number 2 that particular year, I think.
It was
But
definitely in both of our top fives, and that's the thing what happens. That's why I always reluctant to put these lists together more so than you, because I worry about people thinking this is set in stone. And it's not that films that were my number one that year that didn't make this list aren't great films. It's just that as time goes on, you find you come back to certain ones more and more. A year from now, this list could have looked even different. So who knows?
yeah, and we saw it together at the Dark Side down in Corvallis.
Oh yeah, I forgot
It
about that.
was
That's
a great
great.
thing to watch that film. So my number 10 is a controversial pick. Angela's gonna roll her eyes at a couple of my films. Anyway, it's Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, from 2017, directed by Martin McDonagh, and who also directed In Bruges, which is one of the great comedies of the last 20 years or so. This is a dramedy that it was controversial at the time, certainly for its ending, because of certain characters. The Sam Rockwell's character, people just not feeling though that his character was necessarily complete. And I kind of like that idea in terms of just not knowing, everything isn't wrapped up in a bow. Not every character is perfect. Certainly in today's time and our environment, when you're certain friends on Facebook, you find out all kinds of different things about them now and how they feel about certain political issues. And so this seems fitting. Of course, at the very end, when his character is actually going off to murder somebody, no one has a problem with that. It's still the fact that they think that maybe he's still racist, or still has racist thoughts. I'm like, but he's also, okay, whichever. Frances McDormand, I thought is won the Academy Award for well-deserved performance. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. And Woody Harrelson, when I think about this film, I always forget about Woody Harrelson's performance in this because it's absolutely incredible and really anchors the film for certainly the first half and then also the second half really well. It's another film about grief, which tends to always rank really high on films that I love to watch. And but yeah, this one I thought about bumping it out to number 11, something which would have been Moneyball, but it just felt right here. And like I said, I know it's not a perfect film, and neither of these is in a perfect time. We don't live in perfect times either, so I thought it was pretty darn fitting. But it's a pretty unique film, a pretty original film in terms of its main crux, and I've seen it many times. I own it. I love this film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to roll my eyes. I thought it was an okay movie, but I definitely am not. I don't have the high opinion of this one as you did. Like many people, I found the about face that Sam Rockwell's character took a little too speedy. I do think there's some great performances in the film, and I miss seeing Frances McDormand on screen more. I just wish she could be in every movie, or if not every movie, way more than she's in. But fortunately, she's become, she's an actor of a certain age, and that means she gets less and less work. But occasionally, she really gets a performance where she can really sink her teeth into it, and this is one of those. And so I really appreciate that. And I love Sam Rockwell. Unfortunately, I think he's gotten typecast in these types of roles to a certain degree, because I know he was in this other one that I can't remember the name of right now that came out earlier this year with Octavia Spencer and got kind of lambasted by the critics. I didn't see it, but he played a Klan member, I believe, going up against her. And so, but he's a great actor as well as Woody Harrelson. So
yeah, it's a great film. I still stand by it.
It was your number one of that year. I do. This one is definitely yours. So you have 100 You have 100 movies of the decade.
Yeah.
100 and what?
108.
108. It's an odd number.
Well, because there was some films that I felt that, like Guardians of the Galaxy, didn't make my top 10 that year, and I think it's one of the best 100 films of the last decade. So that slid in there. There's always a few films that I didn't get to see, like the Jake Gyllenhaal Police one. I forgot to put it in my top 10 that year. Remember?
Is that Enemy? No.
Oh no.
No, the other one. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Well, if I look through it, I'll find it. But yeah, there was just a few films I thought, oh gosh, that's right, that didn't make it, or it was my number 11 pick, and I thought, gosh, it's good enough to be in there. So it's a fun, interesting list.
Yeah.
And not easy to go through, though. Every day I can shuffle through it again.
Yeah, no, definitely same with me. And there was a lot of hand wringing between some of the ones that probably would be like my 11 through 20, and to a certain degree, it almost doesn't make difference. But okay, so we'll move on to my number 9 best favorite film of the decade, and it is Pain and Glory by the great filmmaker Pedro Almodovar, who's now going on his fourth decade of making films. This was my number 1 of 2019, and I kind of grappled whether it would make my top 10 list, but I find myself coming back to this film over and over, particularly the isolation and the melancholy by the central character played by Antonio Banderas, and what I think is the best performance of his career. It's so interesting to me that an actor like Antonio Banderas, you see him in American films and you think, oh, he's just kind of often cast as silly or as the Romeo, and then you see him in a Pedro Almodovar film and he's complex and deep and interesting and almost like a character actor. And same thing with Penelope Cruz, who's in this movie. In American movies, she's often just cast as, the hot Latina girlfriend or love interest. And then in Pedro Almodovar films, he gives her these complex, wonderful, nuanced women to play. So in a director that's had a lot of crowning achievements, this is one of his best films in a really long time. And a movie that's about the love of cinema, about getting older and having regrets in your life and missed opportunities, perhaps. Some of the same themes, actually, that Scorsese hit on in The Irishman, but for me, it felt this much more deeply.
Yeah, that is a fantastic film. I'm really glad it ranked really high with you. It was towards the lower end of my top 10 list, and that's just where things fell. But it is an absolutely beautiful film, and Penelope Cruz really, she could just be in in every film, and that would be just a major accomplishment. But certainly for Antonio Banderas, it was really overlooked. He did get typecast certainly in Hollywood with certain roles, and so to be able to see him really play a full range with with all the emotions there was really something. And but whenever I think of this film, I always think of the look, that great clean look, that cave. People living in
The
caves.
cave that you want to live in.
But man, does it look fantastic! Of course, it helps with Penelope Cruz is there. But and also the costume design, which I always just think are just these mix of different patterns and bright colors, and they're just so vivid. They shouldn't work together, but they just do. He certainly has his feet in reality, but it does create just a beautiful look and kind of a mythical.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to my number 9.
Yeah.
And it's cue Angela's eye roll. My number 9 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from 2019. And this is a really hard one because it's, last year's film. And so, of course, that's the one I remember the most because I just recently had seen it compared to the rest of the films on my list in the theater. And I saw it 3 times in the theater. I've owned it. And so it's really hard not to rank it too high. So I really had to just anchor it here at number 9 and leave it there. It's a Tarantino film. So, of course, certainly the dialogue is going to be incredible. The camera movement in this one is, not since like Pulp Fiction have I seen some really great camera movements in his films. They always do, but this one really stood out, especially the scene where they go out into the farm with Brad Pitt, and that camera is just trying to focus so much on where he's going to be going, even though he's stopping having these conversations. Brad Pitt is fantastic, won an Academy Award, rightfully so. Leonardo DiCaprio really chews the scenery big time, where he's supposed to in this film, and I thought he was fantastic in this. And, with all us being stuck in quarantine, we all kind of pining for yesterday. And though a lot of things are moving forward in the right direction where they should, with a lot of movements, this probably will be one of the last, look backs over the shoulder of the golden age of Hollywood with rose-colored glasses, which I do appreciate, but it also puts things in context of where we are now as well when you watch this film, though it's a little hard to see that at times. And I really appreciate that. Margot Robbie, who I think took a role where she doesn't need a lot of dialogue. And we're going to talk about that in my next picture where, not a lot of dialogue is needed. And I thought she was iconic. I thought she was absolutely wonderful. And it's just an incredible film that, yeah, it is. It's looking back at the golden age of Hollywood where things might seem times romanticized. But there are certainly a lot of other things that the film also takes on that were ugly at the time as well. So I just had to have it in my top 10. I love this movie.
And as I've said before in previous shows, I thought the first half of this film was a 4-star film. I love the friendship between Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, and I loved that aspect of the movie, and I wish he had just stuck with that. It could have been almost like Blindspotting, I mentioned, a movie about male friendship. There was and this idea of melancholy and looking back, and these 2 guys who are seeing the times pass them by. I loved all of that aspect of it. I just felt the whole Sharon Tate Manson murders thing seemed thrown in and really kept me from really fully enjoying the film as much as I would have.
It's a small portion of the film there.
It's a lot of it, and especially in the second half, because the whole last sequence is, focused on that. And to me, it really took away from the feeling that the first half gave me that I just loved, and including the beautiful photography and the set pieces and the period look of it. I was really, that first half, when you have a 3-hour movie, that's the danger, because you have an hour and a half of a really great film there for me. So anyway, so we will move on to my number 8 film. And boy, this is a controversial one for me, even because this didn't even get 4 stars from me when it first came out.
Oh, hold on. So you're pulling a Bryan? You can't do that. What?
I'm pulling a Bryan. You gave it 4 stars. You were right. I'm saying it on air right now. I may never say it again, so lightning's probably going to strike me tomorrow. Bryan was right. He gave this 4 stars. I didn't. I nitpicked over the ending. I've rewatched this film quite a few times, more than almost any movie on this list. And although I still have problems with the ending, it is the best comedy of the decade. Bridesmaids.
Oh, yes.
I stupidly gave this movie 3.5 stars when it first came out because I felt the ending was too pat and tied up with a bow and everyone got everything resolved. And that still bugs me. I rewatched this movie again recently, and I've rewatched it quite a few times since I first saw it in the theater. But no movie makes me laugh as much as this movie. I still, even though I've seen it, 4 or 5 times now, I laughed my butt off when I just watched it. And I watched it with my husband recently, and he was chuckling quite a bit. And this is the movie that gave us Melissa McCarthy, which I feel grateful for because she was in she was in a lot of duds this last decade, but she was in some fantastic movies too, like Can You Forever Forgive Me? I mean, she's a real gem of an artist. And of course, Kristen Wiig, who I love and has really made a mark for herself doing darker comedies. And I think the parts of Bridesmaids that are so good are actually the darker parts. I mean, there's some really silly, great stuff, and there's the famous vomiting scene. But the parts where Kristen Wiig's character, this was a movie that was time topical. It was set during the recession. Woman who's lost her business. She's finding herself at odds. She can't make rent. She feels like everybody else's lives are going, moving on and going in the right direction, and hers is at a standstill. And I think, who couldn't identify with this? She's driving this junky car that keeps breaking down. She's dating this guy played by a wonderful comedic performance by John Hamm, who doesn't appreciate her. I don't even know if dating is quite the right word. And then now her best friend, played by the fantastic Maya Rudolph, is getting married in this dream wedding. And she's got this nemesis played by also fantastic Rose Byrne, who seems like she has it all. She's rich, she's gorgeous, she does everything perfectly, including speak French. And so I think almost anyone, but especially a lot of women out there, can identify with this. The grass is always greener. Seeing someone else's life seems perfect from afar. And so the more I've seen this movie, the more I realize that there's a lot of wisdom here.
Yeah, this is a great film. You can't cast it better. You can't. You can't. This is perfect casting. And Maya Rudolph, who should just be in more pictures, period, is fantastic. I love the fact that when she starts dating Crystal Dool's character, and he tries to make her cook or bake because he loves her baking, and she's like, I don't want to do that because it's hurt. It's something that, it's very much in her soul.
Mm-hmm.
But when she lost her business, she doesn't want to do it anymore. And I recently had watched that film because I loved it. It's number 88 on my list. Ooh,
that's pretty low. I'm surprised.
Well, it was my number 8, I think, on my list for that year. So, it's right between Deepon and Phoenix, right where it should be. And, but, hey, things get weird when you start listing films. But, I love the fact that, she's also really very hurt, and she has to go through her little journey there in order to get over trauma in her life. So my number 8, this is a directorial tour de force. I mean, when you say a film that was directed, Barry Jenkins directed Moonlight. Angela's going to be like, Beale Street? No. Moonlight from 2016. This actually did hurtle forward in my list because I had recently watched that again. And, this film is something you can watch with the sound off. And there's actually several scenes where there's no sound when his mother starts yelling and screaming at him. And we know what's going on, but we don't need to have that sound. We just sit there and watch this, explosion. That are shown on this on the screen that are just so incredible. I mean, this is a film that you can just have running in the background and just having a visual art. You can turn it upside down, you can put it on its side, and it just looks incredible. And even without the sound, I really believe it'll still tell the story because of the way the camera and the angles and the way it's able to tell its story with so few words. It's a heartbreaking, it's a beautiful story, something we don't see a lot of, certainly with Black gays. Being represented certainly in film. This won Best Picture, which was the big, huge to do with the Oscars in the last 10 years.
Deservedly so, over La La Land.
Just for one of his 2 Oscars he won in the past 10 years. Absolutely incredible. Janelle Monáe, who I adore as a singer and keep seeing her in films, but I never recognize her. She just is such a chameleon, and she is so great in this. Naomi Harris is fantastic. This is just a beautiful piece of art. It really is.
It's a great film. Definitely was one of my favorites of that year, and it is going to be on my list, but not quite yet. So I agree with everything you said, though. It's one that I own and have rewatched several times. So we'll move on to my number 7 film, which is from 2011. It is A Separation by the Iranian film Asghar Farhadi. I rewatched this movie recently. And this is one of those movies where it's not the easiest thing to rewatch over and over again because it's a really compelling drama, but it's about a family being torn apart, a couple who are in the midst of separation. And while that's happening, the man, the husband, he is taking care of his elderly father who has Alzheimer's. And he hires a woman to help take care of his father during the day while he's at work, and something horrible happens. Without getting into too much detail, a lot of drama ensues. In a way, it's a melodrama, but the way it's played is very understated. There are no villains and there are no heroes in this movie. There are no easy answers. Everybody does something that's a little bit not so great, as humans often do, but nobody is doing things with malicious or bad intentions. And the writing in this film is so fantastic, and the central performances. When I watched it again, I found myself, remembering certain scenes like I just watched them recently, and then other scenes I was like, oh man, I forgot that it happened. So at the core is also this daughter who's sort of stuck in between this drama happening with her parents. And although the film's set in Iran, and there's definitely some very specific cultural things, particularly related to the role of men and women, of course, there's also some universal themes to this film that everyone can relate with. Aging parents and, struggling to take care of them, finding the right care. I guess I felt better that apparently they don't have great healthcare in Iran either for elderly folks or good helpers. It's not like France where they just send people to your home to help you, apparently, because he's really struggling to find good care for his father, who he loves dearly, and so you really relate with his character. This filmmaker has gone on to make several other great films since then, including The Salesman and Everybody Knows with Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem. Those films are both very good. I think A Separation is his masterpiece.
Yeah, this really put him on the map, and I believe it won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Picture, but he wasn't
It did, yeah.
He didn't show to the ceremony. But yeah, an amazing filmmaker and certainly a talent to watch. So I'll move on to my number 7 here, which is another, this is an action film, a female lead, a Sandra Bullock film in my top 10. Gravity from 2013, directed by Alfonso Cuaron, another amazing director, Children of Men, Roma, the last 10, 15 some odd years. He's really put his stamp on filmmaking, made some incredible pictures. And Sandra Bullock is absolutely fantastic when you use her the right way. I think also her name probably didn't hurt in getting the production value that they wanted for this film. This was the movie that I own on DVD and have not really watched it much on Blu-ray, or I should say on television, because of that theatrical experience was so tough to beat. I remember just grinding my fingers into the armrest and seeing with a couple of friends, and it was just so discombobulating and absolutely just an amazing film that really keeps you on the edge the entire time. It's exhausting towards the end there. George Clooney is great in a George Clooney-esque type role as a charismatic astronaut, which you would really want them to be, something like that. And he's fantastic in this as well, but it's really Sandra Bullock, and it's the special effects, and it's the directing all together in one, and really just put together an amazing story that still I remember quite vividly. I didn't have to rewatch this one.
Yeah, fantastic film. I also gave it 4 stars. Didn't make my top 10 list, but fantastic film. Alfonso Cuaron, one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, really honestly, these days. He almost never makes a bad movie, and you can't say that about very many people. Of course, he does take some spaces, but Gravity, my favorite anti-outer space film. So we'll move on to my number 6 film, and this will be the last one of this episode, but make sure to check out our next episode for our top 5 of the decade. And my number 6 film is If Beale Street Could Talk by Barry Jenkins, a film I own and love so much. Almost love the soundtrack as much as I love this film. Fantastic soul music of the period. This is one of 2 great films made in the past decade based on works by the writer James Baldwin. One is I Am Not Your Negro. That would probably be in my top 20 list if we were doing that on the show. And that one is a documentary. This is a fictional film, but with director Barry Jenkins, who also did Moonlight, at the helm, he turns what could have been a very kind of strident movie into poetry, into art, of two young lovers who are separated when he is jailed, and she must go on carrying their child. Her mother is played by Regina King in an Oscar-winning, very worthy Oscar-winning performance. And along the way, you have at its core how Black Lives Matter, but also how these two young people, you have a great romance. Two genres that aren't done very well anymore, romance and comedy. And that's one of the reasons Bridesmaid made my top 10 list, because there were not very many good comedies in this last decade. It was not a good decade for comedies, in my opinion. Not a lot of good romance on the screen these days. And this was a romance you really felt at your heart.
Yeah, this one's my number 20, just after Tree of Life and ahead of a Blindspotting. It's a weird list.
Tree of Life is another great one, yeah. And Blindspotting.
Oh, that one was, yeah, some of these were just.
It's very hard to pick sometimes, yeah.
No, he's an incredible filmmaker, and I'm really looking forward to what he does next because, yeah, Beale Street was really high on my list, so it's obviously Moonlighting, just an incredible filmmaker. My number 6 was technically a 2010, but also 2011, depending on the release date, whatever. A female director, Lynne Ramsay's We Need to Talk About Kevin. Favorite actress is Tilda Swinton in a powerful performance, and no one saw this movie. It was released weird, so it didn't make anyone's top 10s. It just was a really funky release, and it really was frustrating for me. John C. Reilly's fantastic, and Ezra Miller, if you're watching the show, you need to fire your manager, because whoever got you this and a couple other roles, and then put you into Justice League and a bunch of nothing. This guy should have broken out. This guy should be huge. He should either be, right there with Jake Gyllenhaal or
Timothy Chalamet.
Phoenix. And
he should be getting those kind of roles, He did Perks of Being a Wallflower and these films back to back, and I thought this guy's going to be a superstar, and then nothing.
Made him the Flash, and it just, I don't even want to go into it. I love this movie. When I wanted to show a horror film to some people, though it's necessarily, you could consider it a horror film, a thriller, whatever you want to call it. It's one of those movies at the end of it, everyone goes, Bryan, why did you make us watch this movie? This was just so depressing, and it's very timely. It deals with a topic, I don't want to give things too much away, even though it's been out for 10 some odd years. A topic that's a very traumatic and something that this country deals with. And what's so great about it is that we see the film done in flashbacks. And so we don't know exactly. We just know something bad has happened, and we don't know, and we don't know, and we get closer and we get closer. And then when the tragedy hits, I mean, that is something you just don't forget. This was my favorite film of that particular year, and it's still a gut punch. And Tilda Swinton is fantastic, perfectly cast. It's just incredible. And John C. Reilly is really, really good in this as well.
As the clueless husband, yeah.
Yeah, you don't see those two as as a couple on screen. It's like that doesn't quite. It works out, and it's a really tough film. I mean, yeah,
it's dark. Lynne Ramsay, I think, is another really fantastic filmmaker. She followed up this one with You Were Never Really Here. Both of those films are 4-star films. She made 2 4-star films in the last decade, and either one of those could have been in my top 50, honestly. So she's a fantastic filmmaker, and this is a great, very underseen film. I can see why it's very dark. It's hard to watch, but some of the greatest performances of the last decade for sure. So we will wrap up. Those were our favorite films, 10 through 6 from the last decade. Make sure to watch our next episode to get our top 5. Let's see, I got to do the wrap up here. You can check us out online at realfilmsnobs.com, Facebook, Twitter, on Corvallis Access Media, Silverton, and here on not CCTV anymore, now it's CC Media, and to listen to us on KMUZ. I'd like to thank our fantastic crew calling to you from remotely, and our wonderful sponsors, my wonderful co-host, of course. Thank you for watching. Have a great day and great movies.